Have you ever wondered about the children who vanished from history's pages, lost to time and silence? What if I told you that one of the most mysterious figures in the Bible had descendants whose stories were deliberately erased, hidden away from the world for thousands of years? Today, we're diving into something that will shake everything you thought you knew about biblical genealogy. The man who walked with God so intimately that he never tasted death left behind more than just a legacy of faith. Enoch, the seventh from Adam, carried secrets that have been buried beneath centuries of religious tradition and scholarly oversight. But here's what they don't want you to discover. Enoch had children, and their bloodline carries mysteries that could rewrite our understanding of the ancient world. Before we go any further, if you're ready to uncover truths that have been hidden for millennia, drop a flame emoji in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe, because what we're about to reveal will challenge everything you've been taught about the early chapters of human history. Trust me, this journey will take you deeper into biblical mystery than you ever imagined possible. Now, let me warn you up front, what I'm about to share with you isn't found in your typical Sunday school lesson. This isn't the sanitized version of scripture that most people are comfortable with. We're going into the shadowy corners of ancient texts, into the spaces between the verses, where forgotten names whisper their stories. Are you prepared to handle the truth about Enoch's lost lineage? The story begins in the mists of antiquity, in those primordial days when heaven and earth seemed closer than they do now. Genesis tells us that Enoch walked with God for 300 years after the birth of his son Methuselah. But here's the question that scholars have wrestled with for generations. What happened during those 3 centuries of divine communion? What did Enoch learn in his intimate fellowship with the Almighty? And perhaps, most importantly, what did he pass down to his descendants? You see, the Bible gives us tantalizing glimpses, but never the full picture. We know that Enoch lived 365 years in total, a number that has fascinated mystics and theologians alike. We know that he was the father of Methuselah, who had become the longest-lived man in recorded history. But between these sparse details lies a vast ocean of mystery, and in that ocean swim the hidden children of Enoch. Let me paint you a picture of what life was like in Enoch's time. This was the world before the flood, when the sons of God walked among men and giants roamed the earth. The atmosphere itself was different, charged with spiritual energy that we can barely comprehend today. In this world, Enoch stood out not just as a righteous man, but as someone who had achieved something unprecedented: direct, ongoing communication with the creator of the universe. But communion with God doesn't happen in isolation. When a man walks that closely with the divine, it affects everyone around him. His family, his community, his descendants. They become carriers of something extraordinary, something that sets them apart from the rest of humanity. And this is where our story truly begins, because Enoch's influence extended far beyond his famous son Methuselah. Ancient Jewish traditions, preserved in texts that didn't make it into the canonical Bible, speak of other children born to Enoch during those 300 years of walking with God. These weren't ordinary children. They were born into a household where angelic visitations were commonplace, where prophetic visions shaped daily life, where the boundary between the natural and supernatural had all but disappeared. Think about it for a moment. If Enoch walked with God for 3 centuries, don't you think he would have had more children during that time? The biblical account focuses on Methuselah because he's crucial to the genealogical line leading to Noah. But logic and human nature suggest there were others, brothers and sisters whose names have been lost to history, but whose bloodline continued in secret streams beneath the surface of recorded time. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The Book of Jubilees, an ancient text revered by some early Christian communities, provides tantalizing hints about these forgotten descendants. It speaks of children born to Enoch who inherited not just his longevity, but his spiritual gifts. children who could see into the heavenly realms, who understood the movements of celestial bodies, who possessed knowledge that would later be considered too dangerous for ordinary minds to grasp. But why were these children hidden from mainstream biblical history? The answer lies in what they knew and what they represented. You see, Enoch wasn't just a righteous man who happened to walk with God. He was a keeper of secrets, a repository of divine knowledge that was meant to be preserved through specific bloodlines. His descendants weren't just inheritors of life, they were inheritors of cosmic understanding. These hidden children of Enoch became the guardians of astronomical knowledge, the keepers of calendrical systems, the preservers of prophetic traditions that would echo through the ages. They understood the cycles of heaven and earth in ways that modern science is only beginning to rediscover. They knew about the Watchers, those mysterious beings who descended to earth and corrupted the human race. They possessed maps of spiritual territories that most people couldn't even imagine. And here's what will absolutely blow your mind. Traces of this lost lineage can still be found today, if you know where to look. Scattered throughout ancient cultures around the world are traditions, stories, and genealogical fragments that point back to this hidden branch of Enoch's family tree. From the mountains of Ethiopia to the valleys of Tibet, from the libraries of ancient Egypt to the oral traditions of indigenous peoples, whispers of Enoch's secret children have survived. But the powers that be, both earthly and spiritual, had reasons for wanting this knowledge suppressed. Think about it. If people knew that there were descendants of Enoch still walking among us, carrying within their bloodline the genetic memory of divine communion, it would change everything. It would challenge religious hierarchies, upset political structures, and force humanity to confront truths about our origins that most aren't ready to handle. The suppression wasn't accidental. It was systematic, deliberate, and thorough. When the early church councils decided which books would be included in the biblical canon, they made choices that effectively erased entire genealogical lines from public knowledge. When ancient libraries were burned and manuscripts were destroyed, the stories of Enoch's hidden children went up in smoke along with countless other forbidden truths. Yet some traces survived. In the mystical traditions of various cultures, in the secret teachings passed down through initiate bloodlines, in the coded language of alchemical texts and Gnostic gospels, the memory of Enoch's lost lineage persisted. These weren't just random survivors of historical accident. They were preserved intentionally by those who understood their significance, hidden away like seeds waiting for the right season to sprout. Now, as we stand at what many believe to be the threshold of a new age, these ancient secrets are beginning to surface once again. Archaeological discoveries are uncovering texts that mainstream academia has long dismissed. DNA research is revealing genetic patterns that suggest ancient human populations were far more complex and interconnected than previously thought. And spiritual seekers around the world are reporting experiences that echo the kind of divine communion that Enoch himself once knew. Could it be that the time has come for the hidden children of Enoch to step out of the shadows? Are we witnessing the beginning of a great unveiling, where bloodlines that have remained concealed for millennia finally reveal themselves to a world that's ready to receive their message? The implications are staggering. If these descendants exist, if they've preserved the knowledge and spiritual gifts of their ancient ancestor, then everything we think we know about human potential, about our connection to the divine, about the true history of our species, needs to be reconsidered. We're not just talking about genealogical curiosities here. We're talking about living links to a time when humans walked alongside beings of light, when the veil between dimensions was thin, when knowledge flowed freely between heaven and earth. But with great revelation comes great responsibility. The knowledge that Enoch's hidden children possess isn't just fascinating history, it's dangerous wisdom that could either elevate humanity to unprecedented heights or plunge us into chaos if misused. This is why it was hidden in the first place. This is why only certain bloodlines were trusted with its preservation. As we continue this investigation, we'll be exploring not just who these hidden children were, but who they are today. We'll be tracing bloodlines through history, following paper trails and genetic markers, uncovering evidence that has been hiding in plain sight for centuries. We'll be meeting researchers and investigators who've dedicated their lives to solving this ancient mystery. And perhaps most importantly, we'll be asking the question that could change everything. What happens when the lost lineage of Enoch finally comes home? The search for Enoch's hidden descendants isn't just an academic exercise buried in dusty manuscripts and forgotten scrolls. This is happening right now, in real time, and the evidence is more compelling than you might imagine. What I'm about to share with you will challenge everything you thought you knew about how bloodlines work, how genetic memory operates, and how divine gifts pass from generation to generation. Let me tell you about something that happened just last year. A geneticist working on ancient DNA samples from archaeological sites across the Middle East made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Hidden within the genetic code of certain populations were markers that didn't fit any known human migration pattern. These weren't random mutations or evolutionary adaptations. They were organized, systematic, almost as if they'd been deliberately preserved across thousands of years. When this researcher dove deeper into the data, cross-referencing it with historical records and ancient genealogies, a pattern began to emerge. The same genetic markers kept appearing in bloodlines that could be traced back to the pre-flood era. Not just any bloodlines, but specifically those connected to the patriarchs, to the men who walked closest with God in those earliest days of human history. Now here's where it gets absolutely fascinating. These genetic markers weren't randomly distributed across the population. They appeared in clusters, in family lines that had maintained specific traditions, specific knowledge, specific spiritual practices for millennia. And when researchers started mapping these bloodlines geographically, they found something that made their blood run cold. The hidden children of Enoch hadn't just survived. They'd been strategically positioned across the globe, forming a network that spanned continents and cultures. From the highlands of Scotland to the mountains of Peru, from the deserts of Mongolia to the forests of the Amazon, descendants carrying Enoch's genetic legacy had established themselves in the most remote and protected locations on Earth. But why these places? Why did they choose isolation over influence, hiddenness over power? The answer lies in what they were protecting and what they were preparing for. You see, the knowledge that Enoch received during his 300 years of walking with God wasn't just information. It was a sacred trust, a responsibility that would determine the fate of humanity itself. Think about this for a moment. Enoch was translated, taken up without seeing death, because he had achieved something that no other human had accomplished. He had bridged the gap between the earthly and the divine so completely that his physical body could no longer contain the fullness of what he had become. But that transformation didn't happen overnight. It was a process, a gradual elevation that took place over centuries of intimate communion with the Creator. During those centuries, Enoch wasn't just walking with God in some abstract spiritual sense. He was receiving downloads of cosmic information, understanding the mechanics of creation itself, learning the true names and functions of celestial beings, discovering the hidden histories that had been concealed from human knowledge, and more importantly, he was learning how to pass this knowledge on to those who would come after him. The children born to Enoch during this period weren't ordinary offspring. They were bred for a purpose, genetically and spiritually engineered to carry forward the most precious secrets in the universe. Their DNA had been altered by prolonged exposure to divine presence. Their consciousness had been expanded to perceive realities that existed beyond the normal human range of experience. Oh, and here's what will really blow your mind. These alterations weren't just spiritual or metaphysical. They were physical, measurable, detectable by modern scientific instruments. The genetic markers I mentioned earlier aren't just random sequences of DNA. They're activation codes, dormant programs waiting for the right signal to switch on and unlock capabilities that most people can't even imagine. Recent studies in epigenetics have shown that traumatic experiences can alter gene expression in ways that get passed down through generations. If trauma can create heritable changes, what do you think happens when someone experiences the kind of sustained divine encounter that Enoch lived through for 3 centuries? The genetic modifications would be profound, permanent, and designed to serve a specific purpose in the unfolding plan of creation. But the powers that have controlled human civilization for millennia understood this threat. They knew that somewhere out there, hidden among the general population, were bloodlines carrying the genetic keys to unlock human potential on a scale that would make their systems of control obsolete. So they did what any rational group of power-hungry entities would do. They systematically hunted down and eliminated anyone showing signs of these extraordinary capabilities. The witch hunts of medieval Europe weren't just about superstition and religious hysteria. They were targeted elimination campaigns designed to purge specific genetic lines from the population. The Inquisition wasn't just persecuting heretics. They were conducting genetic warfare against bloodlines that carried the memory of what humanity was meant to become. Think about the timing. These systematic persecutions began right around the time when ancient knowledge was starting to resurface, when manuscripts were being discovered and translated, when people were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions about human origins and capabilities. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a coordinated response to a very real threat to established power structures, but some of the hidden children of Enoch were smarter than their persecutors. They went deeper underground, adopting new identities, scattering to the far corners of the earth, embedding themselves in cultures and communities where they could blend in while secretly preserving their sacred inheritance. They became the guardians of mystery schools, the keepers of alchemical traditions, the preservers of astronomical knowledge that wouldn't be rediscovered by mainstream science for hundreds of years, and they waited. Generation after generation, they maintained their bloodlines, passed down their secrets, prepared for the time when the world would be ready to receive what they had to offer. They knew that eventually, the cycles of history would complete themselves, the cosmic conditions would align, and the hidden children of Enoch would emerge from the shadows to fulfill their ancient destiny. That time is now. We're living in the prophesied era when hidden things are being revealed, when ancient knowledge is surfacing, when bloodlines that have remained concealed for millennia are beginning to activate their dormant genetic programming. The signs are everywhere if you know how to look for them. Children are being born with capabilities that defy scientific explanation. People around the world are spontaneously developing psychic abilities, prophetic visions, direct communication with non-physical intelligences. Ancient sites are becoming active again, resonating with energies that have been dormant for thousands of years. The veil between dimensions is thinning, and those who carry the genetic keys are beginning to remember who they really are. But this awakening isn't happening randomly. It's following specific bloodline patterns, activation sequences that were encoded into human DNA long before recorded history began. The hidden children of Enoch aren't just waking up individually. They're connecting with each other, forming networks, sharing information, preparing for something that most people can't even conceive of. What are they preparing for? That's the question that keeps researchers awake at night, the mystery that drives investigators to spend their lives chasing fragments of ancient truth. Because if the prophecies are correct, if the genetic programming is real, if the hidden bloodlines are indeed awakening, then we're about to witness the return of capabilities that haven't been seen on Earth since before the flood. The implications are staggering. We're not just talking about a few individuals with unusual abilities. We're talking about the potential resurrection of an entire branch of humanity that was thought to be extinct, a branch that carries within its genetic code the blueprint for human consciousness operating at levels that would seem godlike to the rest of us. And if that's true, if the hidden children of Enoch are real and they're awakening now, then everything we think we know about the future is about to change in ways that will leave the old world unrecognizable. The evidence isn't just hiding in ancient texts and genetic laboratories. It's walking among us right now, and the signs are becoming impossible to ignore. Let me share something that happened just 3 months ago that sent ripples through the underground research community and changed everything we thought we knew about how these bloodlines operate. A linguistics professor at a major university was analyzing speech patterns in children from isolated communities around the world when she stumbled upon something that defied every model of language acquisition known to science. Certain children, born to families with no connection to each other, were spontaneously developing identical linguistic structures that didn't exist in any known language. But here's the part that made her hands shake as she compiled her data. When she ran these speech patterns through historical analysis software, they matched fragments of pre-flood languages preserved in the oldest manuscripts on Earth. These weren't children who had been taught these patterns. They were generating them naturally, as if accessing some kind of genetic memory bank that had been dormant for thousands of years. And when researchers started mapping the genealogies of these families, every single one traced back to bloodlines that had maintained unusual spiritual traditions for centuries. But that's just the beginning. What happened next is what convinced even the most skeptical investigators that something unprecedented was occurring. These children began demonstrating abilities that shouldn't exist according to our current understanding of human neurology. They could perceive electromagnetic fields with their naked eyes. They could sense geological changes days before seismic equipment detected them. They could communicate with each other across vast distances without any technological assistance. And here's what really got the attention of those who monitor such things. These children knew things they had no way of knowing. They spoke about celestial events that hadn't been publicly announced. They drew pictures of archaeological sites that hadn't been discovered yet. They recited mathematical formulas that wouldn't be developed by mainstream science for decades. When government agencies started paying attention, when black-budget projects began recruiting these families, when certain bloodlines suddenly found themselves under surveillance they'd never experienced before, that's when the hidden community realized their time of concealment was ending, whether they wanted it to or not. You see, the descendants of Enoch had always known this day would come. Their ancestors had prepared them for the moment when their genetic programming would begin to activate on a global scale. They'd maintained bloodline records going back thousands of years, preserved knowledge that would be crucial for navigating the transition period, established communication networks that existed completely outside conventional channels. But they'd also known that this awakening would bring danger. Throughout history, whenever too many of their kind gathered in one place or became too visible, persecution followed. The difference this time is that they're awakening simultaneously across the entire planet, making targeted elimination impossible. The sheer scale of the phenomenon has overwhelmed the traditional suppression mechanisms. Let me tell you about the Keepers. That's what they call themselves, though most of the world has never heard the term. These are the families who've maintained the purest bloodlines, who've preserved the most complete knowledge, who've been preparing for this moment longer than recorded history extends. They've been living among us for millennia, indistinguishable from ordinary humans, except for certain subtle markers that only they know how to recognize. The Keepers don't advertise their existence. They don't seek publicity or recognition. They blend into every culture, every profession, every level of society. But they watch. They wait. They guide events from the shadows in ways that most people never suspect. And when the time comes for one of their own to awaken to their true nature, they're there to provide guidance and protection. These aren't conspiracy theories or fantasy role-playing games. These are documented bloodline preservation systems that have operated continuously since before the founding of any modern nation. They've survived the fall of empires, the rise of religions, the Industrial Revolution, 2 world wars, and the digital age. And now, as their genetic programming begins to activate on schedule, they're preparing to step out of the shadows for the first time in recorded history. The activation isn't random. It follows specific patterns that were encoded into their DNA thousands of years ago. Certain environmental conditions trigger dormant genes. Specific astronomical alignments unlock new capabilities. Particular combinations of stress and spiritual practice catalyze transformations that seem impossible to outside observers. And here's what the keepers have been tracking with growing excitement and concern. All of these conditions are converging right now. The environmental triggers are present. The astronomical alignments are occurring with unprecedented frequency. The social and spiritual pressures that catalyze awakening are building to levels not seen since before the flood. But awakening brings responsibility. The knowledge that's being unlocked isn't just personally transformative. It's civilizationally dangerous. These aren't parlor tricks or spiritual entertainment. We're talking about capabilities that could reshape the physical world, alter the course of human evolution, or tear holes in the fabric of reality itself if misused. This is why the knowledge was hidden in the first place. This is why only certain bloodlines were trusted with its preservation. The descendants of Enoch don't just carry genetic memories of what their ancestor learned during his centuries of walking with God. They carry the responsibility of deciding when and how that knowledge gets released back into the world. Some of them believe the time has come for full disclosure, for humanity to reclaim its original birthright and step into the cosmic role it was always meant to play. Others argue that the species isn't ready, that releasing too much too fast could trigger catastrophic consequences that would make the flood look like a minor historical footnote. But the decision may not be theirs to make anymore. The awakening is accelerating beyond anyone's ability to control it. Children are being born with capabilities fully activated from birth. Adults are spontaneously developing abilities that used to take decades of training to achieve. The boundaries between the hidden world and the visible world are dissolving faster than the traditional gatekeepers can manage. And that's where things get really interesting, because the keepers aren't the only ones who've been preparing for this moment. There are other forces, other bloodlines, other agendas that have been lying dormant for just as long. Not all of the children of Enoch remained faithful to their original mission. Some branches of the family tree were corrupted, seduced by power, twisted into serving purposes that their ancestor would have found abhorrent. The same genetic gifts that can be used for healing and enlightenment can also be weaponized for control and destruction. The same knowledge that can unlock human potential can also be used to enslave consciousness on a scale that makes current systems of oppression look primitive. The same bloodlines that carry the keys to humanity's liberation also carry the potential for its ultimate subjugation. This is why the awakening isn't just a spiritual phenomenon. It's a cosmic battle being fought on genetic, psychological, and dimensional levels simultaneously. The hidden children of Enoch aren't just remembering who they are. They're choosing which version of themselves they're going to become. Some are aligning with forces of light, dedicating their awakening abilities to healing the planet and elevating human consciousness. Others are being recruited by shadow organizations that want to use these capabilities for maintaining and expanding existing power structures. And still others are being influenced by non-human intelligences that have their own agenda for humanity's future. The choice isn't just individual, it's collective. The direction that this awakening takes will determine not just the fate of the bloodlines involved, but the destiny of our entire species. We're at a crossroads that was prophesied thousands of years ago, and the decisions being made right now will echo through the next millennium of human history. But here's what most people don't understand about how this works. The awakening isn't limited to the pure bloodlines. The genetic modifications that occurred in Enoch's time weren't contained within isolated family trees. Through intermarriage, migration, and what some researchers call genetic seeding, traces of this enhanced DNA have spread throughout the human population. That means millions of people walking around right now carry dormant capabilities they don't even know they possess. Under the right conditions, with the right triggers, these latent abilities can activate in individuals who have no idea they're connected to the hidden children of Enoch. The awakening could be far more widespread than anyone has imagined. And if that's true, if the genetic keys to enhanced human consciousness are scattered throughout our species, like seeds waiting for the right season to sprout, then we're not just talking about the return of a lost bloodline. We're talking about the potential transformation of humanity itself. The question isn't whether this awakening is real. The evidence is too overwhelming, the patterns too consistent, the phenomena too widespread to dismiss. The question is what we're going to do with this knowledge. How we're going to respond when the hidden children of Enoch step fully into the light and reveal what they've been preparing for all these centuries. Because ready or not, the great unveiling has begun. The bloodlines are awakening. The ancient knowledge is surfacing. And the world, as we've known it, is about to change in ways that will leave nothing untouched. The signs are accelerating. The patterns are converging. And time is running out for those who want to understand what's coming before it arrives in full force. The hidden children of Enoch have been patient for millennia, but their patience is reaching its end. The cosmic clock is striking midnight, and the hour of revelation is finally at hand. What you're about to discover next will challenge everything you thought you knew about how these bloodlines have been manipulating world events from behind the scenes. Because the hidden children of Enoch didn't just preserve knowledge and wait passively for their time to come. They've been actively shaping human civilization for thousands of years, guiding it toward this moment of awakening with a precision that will leave you speechless. Let me paint you a picture of what's really been happening throughout history. Every major turning point in human development, every leap forward in consciousness, every breakthrough that seemed to come from nowhere can be traced back to the influence of these hidden bloodlines. The Renaissance wasn't a random cultural explosion. The scientific revolution wasn't just curiosity driving discovery. The technological advances that brought us to the modern age weren't accidents of human ingenuity. They were orchestrated events, carefully timed releases of knowledge that had been preserved since before the flood. The descendants of Enoch have been feeding humanity information at precisely calculated intervals, preparing our species for the moment when the full revelation could be safely unleashed. Think about it. How did ancient civilizations suddenly develop astronomical knowledge that we're only now rediscovering? How did they build structures that our modern technology still struggles to replicate? How did they understand mathematical principles that weren't supposed to be discovered for thousands of years? The answer is simple once you see the pattern. They had help, not from extraterrestrials or lost advanced civilizations, but from bloodlines that had never lost the knowledge in the first place. The hidden children of Enoch were there in Babylon, sharing fragments of cosmic understanding with the Magi and astronomers. They were present in ancient Egypt, guiding the construction of monuments that would serve as markers for future generations. They walked among the Greek philosophers, seeding ideas that would eventually blossom into the foundations of Western thought. But here's what makes this even more incredible. These interventions weren't random acts of kindness or casual sharing of information. They were part of a master plan that spans millennia, a carefully orchestrated preparation for the moment when humanity would be ready to reclaim its full potential. Every piece of knowledge released, every breakthrough facilitated, every discovery guided was designed to bring us to exactly where we are right now. Think about the timing. We're living in an era when human consciousness is expanding at an unprecedented rate, when ancient spiritual practices are being validated by quantum physics, when the boundaries between science and mysticism are dissolving before our eyes, when people all over the world are spontaneously developing abilities that were once considered impossible. This isn't coincidence. This is the culmination of a plan that was set in motion before recorded history began. The hidden children of Enoch have been playing the longest game in human history, and we're finally approaching the endgame. But here's where it gets really fascinating. They haven't been working alone. Throughout the centuries, they've been identifying and recruiting individuals from other bloodlines who showed the potential for awakening. People who carried diluted traces of the original genetic modifications, who could serve as bridges between the hidden world and ordinary humanity. These recruits became the secret societies, the mystery schools, the esoteric traditions that have preserved fragments of ancient wisdom throughout the dark ages of human ignorance. They weren't just preserving knowledge for academic purposes. They were maintaining activation networks, creating pathways through which the awakening could spread when the time was right. And that time is now. The networks are activating, the pathways are opening, the carefully placed seeds of enhanced consciousness are beginning to sprout simultaneously across the globe. What looked like separate movements, isolated phenomena, random occurrences, are revealing themselves to be connected parts of a vast awakening that's been building for thousands of years. But awakening brings chaos before it brings clarity. The old systems that have controlled human civilization for millennia aren't going to surrender their power without a fight. They've known about the hidden bloodlines longer than most people realize. They've been preparing for this moment just as carefully, but with a very different agenda. You see, not all of the descendants of Enoch remain true to their original purpose. Some branches of the family tree were seduced by the very forces they were supposed to resist. They took the knowledge and abilities they'd inherited and used them not for humanity's elevation, but for its subjugation. These corrupted bloodlines have been working just as long and just as carefully to ensure that when the awakening comes, it serves their interests rather than humanity's true potential. This is why the current moment is so dangerous. We're not just witnessing the activation of dormant genetic programming. We're watching the culmination of a war that's been raging in the shadows for thousands of years. A war between the forces that want to see humanity ascend to its cosmic birthright, and those that want to keep us trapped in ignorance and servitude. The battlefield isn't just physical or political, it's consciousness itself. The awakening abilities that are manifesting in bloodlines around the world can be channeled toward liberation or domination. The same genetic gifts that can heal can also harm. The same knowledge that can enlighten can also enslave. The outcome depends entirely on which version of the legacy wins the struggle for influence over the awakening bloodlines. And here's what will really shock you. This battle isn't being fought just by human descendants of ancient lineages. There are non-human intelligences involved, beings that have been influencing human development since the beginning. Some of these entities have been working with the faithful children of Enoch, helping to guide humanity toward its true potential. Others have been corrupting the bloodlines, twisting the sacred knowledge toward their own ends. The Watchers that Enoch wrote about in his visions, the beings that descended and corrupted the pre-flood world, never really left. They've been operating in the shadows all this time, working to ensure that when the hidden bloodlines finally emerge, they serve the agenda of control rather than liberation. They've infiltrated governments, religious institutions, financial systems, even the research organizations that are studying these phenomena, but they made one crucial mistake. They underestimated the purity of the preservation systems that the faithful bloodlines maintained. Despite thousands of years of attempted corruption, infiltration, and manipulation, the core knowledge and genetic integrity of Enoch's true descendants remained intact. The awakening that's happening now isn't the controlled, limited activation that the dark forces expected. It's a full spectrum emergence that's beyond their ability to contain or direct. This is why we're seeing such chaos in the world right now. The systems of control that have operated for millennia are breaking down because they were designed to manage ordinary human consciousness, not the enhanced awareness that's emerging in bloodlines around the globe. The old methods of manipulation don't work on people who can see through dimensional veils, who can perceive the true nature of reality, who carry within their genetic memory the blueprint of what humanity was originally meant to become. But the chaos is just the beginning. What comes next will determine whether our species emerges from this transition as free beings claiming their cosmic inheritance, or as enhanced slaves serving masters they can't even perceive. The hidden children of Enoch are waking up to find themselves at the center of a battle they've been preparing for their entire genetic history. Some of them are ready. They've maintained their bloodline purity, preserved the knowledge intact, developed the spiritual discipline necessary to wield their awakening abilities responsibly. They're emerging as teachers, healers, and guides for the broader awakening that's spreading through the human population. Others are confused, overwhelmed by abilities they don't understand, vulnerable to manipulation by forces that want to use their gifts for purposes their ancestors would have found abhorrent. They're being recruited by organizations that promise answers and belonging, but deliver only a different form of slavery. And still others are discovering that their bloodline carries not just gifts, but curses. Not just knowledge, but corruption that was seeded generations ago by entities that have been playing the long game just as patiently as the forces of light. They're finding themselves at war with their own genetic programming, fighting battles inside their own consciousness between the light and dark aspects of their inheritance. The outcome of these individual struggles will determine the direction of the collective awakening, because the hidden children of Enoch aren't just awakening as individuals, they're connecting with each other, forming networks, sharing knowledge, preparing to step into roles that have been waiting for them since before the flood. They're remembering not just who they are, but what they came here to do. And what they came to do is nothing less than midwife, the birth of a new phase of human evolution. Not the gradual, random process that mainstream science describes, but a conscious, directed transformation that will elevate our entire species to capabilities that were lost when the ancient world was destroyed. They carry within their genetic code the keys to technologies that make our current science look primitive, to spiritual practices that can transform consciousness on a planetary scale, to knowledge that can heal not just individuals, but entire ecosystems. But transformation on that scale requires more than just awakened individuals. It requires a critical mass of activated consciousness working in harmony towards shared goals. It requires the integration of ancient wisdom with modern understanding. It requires the cooperation of bloodlines that have been separated and hidden for thousands of years. Most importantly, it requires ordinary humans to recognize that they too carry traces of this enhanced genetic heritage. The awakening isn't limited to the purest bloodlines. The genetic modifications that occurred in the time of Enoch spread throughout the human population through intermarriage and what some researchers are calling spontaneous genetic activation. Under the right conditions, with the proper triggers, people with no knowledge of their connection to the hidden children can suddenly find themselves developing abilities they never knew they possessed. This is why the current moment is so crucial. We're not just witnessing the emergence of a hidden elite. We're potentially seeing the activation of latent capabilities in millions of people around the world. The question is whether these newly awakened individuals will be guided by the faithful descendants of Enoch toward humanity's elevation, or corrupted by the dark bloodlines toward a more sophisticated form of enslavement. The signs are everywhere if you know how to read them. Children being born with extraordinary abilities, adults suddenly developing psychic gifts, ancient sites becoming active after centuries of dormancy, technologies being discovered that seem to violate known physical laws, spiritual experiences becoming commonplace among people who never considered themselves particularly spiritual. But perhaps most significantly, people are beginning to remember things they never learned, to know things they were never taught, to see connections that weren't there before. They're accessing what researchers are calling genetic memory, inherited knowledge that's been dormant in their DNA for thousands of years. They're having visions of the antediluvian world, receiving information about technologies and spiritual practices that existed before the flood, understanding languages they've never studied. But this isn't happening randomly. It's following specific patterns that were encoded into human consciousness long before recorded history began. The same patterns that guided the preservation of the hidden bloodlines are now triggering the awakening of dormant capabilities throughout the general population. What was once limited to carefully maintained family lines is spreading like a genetic wildfire through communities that have no idea what's happening to them. And that's where the real danger lies. Because awakening without guidance is chaos. Developing extraordinary abilities without understanding their purpose or proper use is like giving nuclear weapons to children. The same capabilities that could heal the world could also tear it apart if they're not channeled properly. This is why the emergence of the hidden children of Enoch is so critical. They're not just awakening to reclaim their own inheritance. They're awakening to serve as guides and teachers for the broader transformation that's beginning to sweep through humanity. They carry within their bloodlines not just the genetic keys to enhance consciousness, but the wisdom traditions necessary to use those keys responsibly. But they're running out of time. The awakening is accelerating faster than anyone anticipated. The careful, gradual revelation that was planned for this era is being overwhelmed by spontaneous activations that are occurring without proper preparation or guidance. The systems that were designed to manage this transition are being stretched beyond their limits. Some of the hidden bloodlines are panicking, trying to slow down or control an awakening that has taken on a life of its own. Others are embracing the chaos, believing that only through complete breakdown of the old systems can the new consciousness fully emerge. Still others are being overwhelmed by the sheer scale of what they're being called to manage, unprepared for the level of responsibility that their genetic inheritance is placing on their shoulders. Meanwhile, the corrupted bloodlines are working overtime to exploit the confusion, to position themselves as guides and teachers for the newly awakened, to channel the emerging abilities toward their own agenda of control and domination. They're offering answers to people who are desperate to understand what's happening to them, providing structure and purpose to individuals who are lost in their own transformation. The battle for the future of human consciousness is being fought right now, in real time, as awakening individuals choose which version of guidance they're going to accept. The outcome will determine whether this great emergence leads to liberation or a more sophisticated form of slavery than humanity has ever known. And here's what makes this moment even more critical. We're not just dealing with human players in this cosmic game. The same non-human intelligences that influenced the ancient world are active again, working through both the faithful and corrupted bloodlines to advance their own agendas for humanity's future. Some want to see us ascend to our full potential and take our place in a larger cosmic community. Others want to harvest our enhanced capabilities for their own purposes. The hidden children of Enoch find themselves at the center of influences and pressures that extend far beyond Earth itself. They're awakening not just to their human inheritance, but to their role in conflicts that span dimensions and species. They're being called to make choices that will affect not just our world, but entire galactic civilizations that have been watching and waiting to see what humanity becomes. The knowledge they carry, the abilities they're developing, the connections they're forming, aren't just about personal transformation or even planetary awakening. They're about humanity's graduation to cosmic citizenship, our species' transition from an isolated world to a member of a vast community of conscious beings that exists throughout the universe. But graduation requires passing tests, demonstrating wisdom, proving that enhanced capabilities will be used responsibly rather than destructively. The hidden children of Enoch aren't just awakening to reclaim ancient abilities. They're awakening to demonstrate humanity's readiness for cosmic responsibility. The stakes couldn't be higher. The choices being made right now will echo through eternity. And time is running out for humanity to prove that it deserves the inheritance that has been preserved for thousands of years in the bloodlines of those who walked most closely with the divine. The hidden children of Enoch are emerging from the shadows, but what they do with their emergence will determine everything that comes after. Will they fulfill the purpose their bloodlines were created for, or will they become another chapter in humanity's long history of falling short of its potential? The answer is being written right now in the choices being made by awakening individuals around the world who are just beginning to understand the magnitude of what they carry within their genetic code. The convergence is accelerating beyond all predictions, and what I'm about to reveal will challenge every assumption you've held about where this is all heading. Because the awakening of these bloodlines isn't just a spiritual phenomenon or even a genetic activation, it's the fulfillment of a prophecy that was encoded into the very fabric of creation itself, a cosmic appointment that has been kept with mathematical precision across thousands of years. Let me share something that happened just 6 weeks ago that changed everything. A team of archaeologists working at a newly discovered site in the Caucasus Mountains unearthed a chamber that had been sealed for over 4,000 years. Inside, they found something that sent shockwaves through the underground research community and forced even the most skeptical investigators to confront the reality of what we're dealing with. The chamber contained what can only be described as a genetic archive, stone tablets inscribed with family trees that stretched back to the very dawn of human civilization. But these weren't ordinary genealogies. They were bloodline maps showing the exact distribution of enhanced genetic markers throughout human populations across the globe. And the precision was terrifying. Every major migration pattern, every significant historical event, every rise and fall of civilizations had been predicted and accounted for in these ancient records. The dispersal of Enoch's descendants wasn't random survival. It was strategic positioning on a scale that required knowledge of future events spanning millennia. Someone or something had orchestrated the placement of these bloodlines with the kind of foresight that should have been impossible for ancient peoples to possess. But here's where it gets absolutely mind-bending. The tablets didn't just map the past, they contained activation sequences tied to specific astronomical alignments, genetic triggers that would remain dormant until precise cosmic conditions were met. And according to these calculations, every single one of those conditions is converging right now in our lifetime with a precision that defies any possibility of coincidence. The hidden children of Enoch weren't just preserving knowledge and waiting for their time to come. They were positioned according to a cosmic timetable that was established before the foundations of the world were laid. Their awakening isn't happening because of random environmental factors or social pressures. It's happening because the universe itself has reached a specific point in its evolution where these capabilities are not just possible, but necessary. Think about what this means. Every major breakthrough in human consciousness over the past century has been leading to this moment. The discovery of quantum mechanics, the development of global communication networks, the breakdown of traditional religious structures, the environmental crises forcing us to think beyond national boundaries. None of it was accidental. All of it was preparation for a transformation that required humanity to reach a specific level of technological and spiritual development before it could safely occur. The descendants of Enoch have been monitoring these developments, measuring our progress against the cosmic timetable, preparing to emerge at the exact moment when their intervention would have maximum impact. And that moment is now. The calculations show that we've reached the narrow window of opportunity where the awakening can succeed without destroying the very civilization it's meant to elevate. But the window is closing faster than anyone anticipated. The same cosmic forces that are triggering the genetic activations are also destabilizing the systems that hold our current reality together. We're experiencing what researchers are calling a phase transition, a fundamental shift in the nature of consciousness itself that's affecting every level of existence simultaneously. The hidden bloodlines find themselves awakening into a world that's changing so rapidly that even their ancient preparations may not be sufficient. They're developing capabilities that were meant to emerge gradually over decades, but they're manifesting in months or even weeks. Children are being born with full access to genetic memories that should have taken years of training to unlock. Adults are spontaneously developing abilities that their ancestors spent lifetimes learning to control. And here's what's really keeping the keepers awake at night. The accelerated awakening isn't just happening in the pure bloodlines. It's triggering dormant sequences in the general population at rates that are overwhelming every support system that was put in place to manage this transition. Millions of people are beginning to experience reality shifts, consciousness expansions, and psychic phenomena without any framework for understanding what's happening to them. The carefully orchestrated revelation that was supposed to unfold over generations is compressing into a timeline measured in years or even months. The gradual introduction of enhanced human capabilities that would allow society to adapt is being replaced by a sudden emergence that's threatening to tear apart the fabric of consensus reality itself. But perhaps most significantly, the awakening is attracting attention from forces that were supposed to remain dormant until much later in the process. The same cosmic conditions that are triggering genetic activations in human bloodlines are also awakening entities and intelligences that have been sleeping in the deep places of the Earth and the far reaches of space. Not all of these awakening presences have humanity's best interests at heart. The hidden children of Enoch are finding themselves caught between competing agendas that extend far beyond anything their ancestors could have imagined. They're being contacted by beings claiming to be the original sources of their genetic modifications, offering to complete the transformation in exchange for servitude to cosmic hierarchies that exist beyond human comprehension. They're being recruited by shadow organizations that want to weaponize their abilities for purposes that would make their blood run cold. They're being courted by spiritual movements that promise enlightenment but deliver only another form of control. Meanwhile, the faithful descendants are struggling to maintain the purity of their mission while adapting to circumstances that their ancient protocols never anticipated. They're having to make decisions about releasing knowledge and activating capabilities that were meant to remain secret for decades longer. They're being forced to choose between protecting the larger awakening process and protecting the individuals who are being overwhelmed by changes they're not prepared to handle. Some bloodlines are fragmenting under the pressure, splitting into factions that can't agree on how to proceed. Others are going completely underground, cutting off all contact with the outside world while they try to figure out how to navigate the chaos their own awakening is creating. Still others are embracing the acceleration, believing that only through complete transformation can humanity survive what's coming next. Because what's coming next is bigger than just human evolution. The cosmic timetable that's driving these changes isn't just about our species reaching its full potential. It's about Earth itself transitioning to a new phase of existence, one that will require conscious cooperation between human and non-human intelligences, on a scale that's never been attempted before. The hidden children of Enoch carry within their genetic code more than just enhanced human capabilities. They carry the keys to technologies that can facilitate planetary transformation, to spiritual practices that can bridge dimensions, to knowledge that can heal not just individuals or communities, but entire worlds. Their awakening is meant to coincide with a larger cosmic event that will affect every form of consciousness in this sector of the galaxy. But they're not the only ones who've been preparing for this moment. Throughout the universe, other species have been monitoring Earth's development, waiting to see whether humanity would successfully navigate its evolutionary transition or destroy itself in the attempt. Some of these observers are allies, ready to welcome us into a larger community of conscious beings. Others are predators, waiting to harvest whatever capabilities we develop during our transformation. The choices being made by awakening bloodlines right now will determine not just humanity's future, but our planet's role in cosmic civilization. Will we emerge as sovereign beings capable of cosmic citizenship? Or will we become resources to be exploited by more advanced species that have been playing the long game far longer than even the hidden children of Enoch? The battle for human consciousness that's been raging in the shadows for millennia is about to become visible to everyone. The awakening abilities, the emerging technologies, the breakdown of consensus reality, the contact with non-human intelligences, all of it is accelerating toward a convergence point that will leave nothing unchanged. And at the center of this transformation stand the descendants of a man who walked so closely with the divine that death itself could not claim him. They carry within their bloodlines the genetic keys to humanity's graduation to cosmic citizenship. But they also carry the responsibility for ensuring that graduation leads to freedom rather than a more sophisticated form of slavery. The ancient enemy that corrupted the pre-flood world is stirring again, adapting its strategies to the new conditions, offering shortcuts and false promises to awakening individuals who are desperate for guidance and belonging. The same entities that once seduced the Watchers are now targeting the hidden bloodlines, trying to corrupt the very source of humanity's potential liberation. But the faithful descendants aren't facing this challenge alone. The same cosmic intelligence that guided Enoch through his transformation is actively working through the awakening process, providing protection and guidance to those who remain true to their original purpose. The battle isn't just between competing human agendas. It's between fundamental forces that have been shaping the evolution of consciousness throughout the universe. The outcome will be determined by choices being made right now by individuals who are just beginning to understand the magnitude of what they carry within their genetic code. Every person who awakens to their connection to these ancient bloodlines faces a decision that will echo through eternity. Will they serve the agenda of liberation or control? Will they use their emerging abilities to heal or to harm? Will they honor the sacrifice of their ancestors or betray the trust that's been preserved for thousands of years? The signs are accelerating. The patterns are converging. The ancient prophecies are fulfilling themselves with a precision that leaves no room for doubt. The hidden children of Enoch are stepping into the light, carrying with them the keys to humanity's cosmic destiny. But keys can open doors to freedom or to prison. Knowledge can illuminate or destroy. Power can liberate or enslave. The same genetic inheritance that carries the blueprint for human apotheosis also contains the potential for our ultimate downfall. The choice is ours. The time is now, and the consequences will determine not just our own fate, but the future of consciousness itself in this corner of the universe. What happens next depends entirely on whether we prove worthy of the inheritance that has been preserved for us through thousands of years of faithful guardianship. The hidden children of Enoch have done their part. They've maintained the bloodlines, preserved the knowledge, and prepared for this moment of revelation. Now it's up to all of us to decide what we do with what they're offering. Because the awakening isn't limited to the pure bloodlines anymore. It's spreading throughout humanity like a genetic wildfire, and every person who catches that fire faces the same choice that the descendants of Enoch are grappling with. Will we ascend to our true potential, or will we repeat the mistakes that destroyed the ancient world? The answer is being written right now in the choices we make, the alliances we form, and the version of ourselves we choose to become as the great unveiling reaches its climactic crescendo. The hidden children of Enoch have emerged from the shadows. Their lost lineage has been exposed, and nothing will ever be the same again. The cosmic clock is striking midnight. The ancient seals are breaking, the bloodlines are awakening, and the fate of human consciousness hangs in the balance as we stand at the threshold of the most significant transformation our species has ever faced. What will you choose when the awakening reaches you? Because it's coming, whether you're ready or not. The genetic keys are activating, the ancient knowledge is surfacing, and the time for hiding in ignorance or denial is rapidly coming to an end. The hidden children of Enoch have kept their promise. They've preserved what was meant to be preserved. They've waited for the appointed time, and they've emerged to offer humanity one final chance to claim its cosmic inheritance. What we do with that offer will determine everything that comes after. The choice is ours. The time is now. And the consequences will echo through eternity. If this revelation has stirred something deep within your spirit, if you feel the call to understand your own connection to these ancient bloodlines, let me know by commenting, "I am awakening" below. Share this video with others who are ready to handle the truth about humanity's hidden heritage. Subscribe and ring that notification bell, because what we're uncovering is just the beginning. The great unveiling has begun. The lost lineage has been exposed. And you are witnessing the emergence of mysteries that have been hidden since the dawn of time. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey into the shadows of our forgotten past and the light of our cosmic future. The truth has been revealed, the choice is yours, and the awakening cannot be stopped.